Matt, I don't know if you can answer this question, but let's say the SEC had denied these Ethereum spot ETFs. Would you and the folks at Bitwise have issued a lawsuit against the SEC?
It's a fair question.
This content is brought to you by BitGo, which is one of the top crypto custodians in the crypto industry. BitGo works with many big companies and brands, such as Pantera Capital, Bitstamp, and Bitcoin IRA. Nike also selected BitGo to power its wallets for its NFTs. And BitGo has many great services, such as hot wallets, custodial wallets, self-managed cold wallets, and NFT wallets. Many institutions trust BitGo with its top-level security and incredible services such as being able to deploy your capital while it's in custody, which includes lending, borrowing, trading, staking, DeFi access, and more. If you'd like to learn more about BitGo, please visit bitgo.com, link in the description. Welcome to the Thinking Crypto podcast. I'm your host, Tony Edward, and with me today is Matt Hougan, who's the Chief Investment Officer at Bitwise Asset Management. Matt, great to see you.
Tony, it's great to be back on the show. Good to see you too.
Matt, there's been a lot of developments around the Ethereum spot ETF applications. We saw that the SEC approved the 19Bs. Now you guys are in the running for the S1s to be approved. Tell us about that process, and are you anticipating an approval in maybe over the next month or so?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, I can't talk specifically about our application because it's live at the SEC, but I can talk about the process generally. As you mentioned, before an ETF goes live, the SEC needs to approve two things: the 19B4, which goes through the Trading and Markets Division, and the S1, which goes through Investment Management. As you mentioned, for spot Ethereum, they approved the 19B4, saying they're ready for trading. The S1 is the disclosures that describes the risks of an ETF. Usually those are approved at the same time. This is a somewhat unusual situation where one was approved without the other. And the estimates I've seen out there, Bloomberg's ETF analysts expect that these funds could go live the week of July 2nd. I think that's a reasonable estimate, but the truth is we don't know. We have to wait to hear more from the SEC and see where we go from there.
Do you think the difference this time around, where they didn't approve them together, had something to do with the staking component, which they seem to don't want to be included, and also some potential litigation happening, which was dropped? Do you think those things were factors?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes with the SEC, but it's certainly the case that in the Ethereum ecosystem, we saw a lot of developments all at once, right? We saw the Consensys lawsuit dropped. We saw this surprise progress on the 19B4s. We saw, maybe some shifting winds in Congress around crypto generally, and maybe around ETH specifically. So I think it's fair to say that the environment in DC changed around Ethereum over the summer in positive ways. And we're seeing that expressed, from my view, in multiple places.
Now, with regards to the staking, the SEC is saying they don't want that in right now, but do you foresee maybe a year from now or a couple of years from now, they allow a staking version once there's clear regulations around that?
Yeah, my hope and my feeling is that staking is a very important part of the Ethereum ecosystem, and ETPs should be an important part of how people invest in Ether. And therefore, long term, you want to see Ether ETPs that stake. And if you look abroad, if you look in Europe, if you look in Canada, if you look in some other markets, those products exist. There are a few challenges, Tony. There's some liquidity restrictions when you stake that can make processing the ETF a little bit more complex. There are, of course, regulatory questions, but Europe and Canada proves that we can overcome those and run good products in an ETP structure. So I do think we will get there, but look, going from no ETF to an ETF is a huge jump. That's what, 90+% of the returns historically. Adding staking would be like a cherry on top. And we and other issuers are going to, hopefully work to make that happen eventually. At least we're going to try.
Yeah, great point. That this in itself, the major hurdles to get this ETF going for the asset. With regards to staking, so I personally, my portfolio is divided with ETH that I have staking, and I'm not touching it. It's just going to be there earning me passive income and yield. Um, but then there's other Ethereum that I'm trading on the market. Do you foresee the investors and folks like yourself advising consumers, hey, let's split this up? 50% of your money in ETFs that you can go in and out of and rebalance, but also here, hold this for the next 5 years and stake it and earn that yield.
Yeah, I think you see a number of things if you look abroad, right? If you look at those European Ethereum ETPs that do stake, they don't always stake 100% of their assets. They need to keep some portion of their portfolio liquid to handle money that comes in and out. Because as we've seen from the Bitcoin ETPs, there are days where there are big inflows and there are days where there are outflows. Even in a rising market, you get those outflow days. So you need the liquidity. I suspect that's what we're going to see. I think investors are going to do a variety of things in the ETH space. I think some will want to handle it themselves and stake it themselves. Some will want to hold it directly, but work with a third party to stake it. Some will want to hold it in ETPs if those launch. That's what we see in Bitcoin. People hold Bitcoin in a variety of different wrappers for a variety of different means. I think what you're doing makes sense, and I suspect many people will as well.
Mm. Now, going back to the case against Consensys, where the SEC was investigating Ethereum 2.0, as they call it, um, do you think now there's that cloud is gone, and investors won't have any hesitation in investing in these ETFs once they go live? That this thing has been put to bed?
I think it's more like when there's a giant thunderstorm that's looming on the horizon, but then the sun comes up and it gets less dark. So I don't think the cloud has gone away completely. I wouldn't say that we've signaled the all clear, but we've gone from a space of sort of gathering darkness to a space of increasing light and increasing clarity. I think launching, if we see these spot ETH ETFs launch, that will be another sort of brick in that wall that gives us increased clarity. Some investors will still be hesitant because we're not 100% clear on ETH from a regulatory perspective. But boy, are we in a better place than we were even in April, right? We've really made significant progress. And so I think that makes the case for ETH stronger. I think it will help more large firms build on ETH, and it will let more investors come into the space as well.
Matt, I don't know if you can answer this question, but let's say the SEC had denied these Ethereum spot ETFs. Would you and the folks at Bitwise have issued a lawsuit against the SEC?
It's a fair question, and you're right that it's one that I'm not going to answer. So, but it's a fair and good question.
Uh, I think I know the answer, but I'll leave it at that. Now, what are your predictions? I know this is speculating, but what are your predictions as far as what the inflows may look like over the next year for the Ethereum ETFs?
Yeah, we just did an analysis of this. I suspect that there are going to be $15 billion in net flows between now and the end of 2025. Now, I should add a few comments on that. That doesn't mean $15 billion in AUM. That means $15 billion in new money coming in. Of course, Tony, there's already $10 billion in ETH, the grayscale product, which will convert over. And if the price of ETH goes up, which I know many of us think and hope it will, that will increase the AUM as well. $15 billion would be a ton of money. It would make these the second most successful ETF launch of all time after Bitcoin. The way we got those numbers is twofold. We looked at the relative market cap of Bitcoin versus ETH, right, which is about 75-25, and then applied that to the amount of AUM in Bitcoin ETFs on the assumption that most investors will allocate proportionally. And then we looked abroad to Europe and to Canada. And when you look there, ETH ETPs hold about 22 to 23% of the market. So that gives me a feeling that, if you look at the size of Bitcoin ETFs, the ETH ETF should be about 25% of that market. We do more complicated math to get to the exact $15 billion target, but I think you can have a lot of confidence. Wherever you look, there's demand for these spot ETH ETFs. And I think if they launch in the US, there will be demand here as well.
Now, speaking of international, and I apologize if I didn't miss this, but is Bitwise planning to go international with different ETPs or ETFs?
We have some partnerships internationally. We have a crypto equity ETP that's partnered in Australia and one that's in Switzerland. But right now, we're a US based provider. We're certainly always keeping our eyes on Europe as well. I was just using that as a reference point to show that investors do want exposure to Ethereum in an ETP format in every market that they've launched so far. And I don't think the US is going to be any different from that.
Mm. Kind of a dumb question. If I'm in Hong Kong, can I access the United States Bitcoin ETFs or other jurisdictions?
It's a complex question and not a dumb one. The answer is yes. Some of those investors feel more comfortable accessing European ETPs that fit under the UCITS framework, which is a specific regulatory framework that's sort of known throughout the world. Others can favor US ETPs. Others have restrictions. But the answer is some investors can access ETPs in different markets, and you see cross-border flow, particularly in the most liquid ETPs.
Interesting. Um, Now, Matt, there's been a lot of talks about other altcoin ETFs, given that Ethereum is now getting its own, and it's in the altcoin category outside of Bitcoin, of course. There's talks of Solana, there's talks of XRP. What are your thoughts, given that the process is usually there needs to be a futures market first, then come the spot ETFs?
Yeah, I love your pillows, and we're working down them as fast as we can. But I think the last point holds with it, which is without a regulated futures market, it's really hard to get a commodity ETP through the SEC. In fact, it's never happened, not in the history of commodities. There's never been a commodity ETP, and that's what these crypto ETPs are,
Mm.
that doesn't have a related futures market that you can surveil. So I think we will either need futures to launch on Solana or XRP on the CME, or we'll need major legislative progress. Look,
Mm.
eventually, I think we're going to get there,
Yeah.
but I think you're talking 2025, 2026, 2027. I know that's an eternity in crypto years, but the Bitcoin ETF suggests it's worth the wait. So I would just say keep that in mind.
Yeah, and by that time, I think a lot of things would be clear because, look, I don't know what's going to happen this presidential election, but the current administration could be out, which includes Gary Gensler and so forth. And Congress could have pushed that FIT 21 bill through the Senate, then it goes to the president, becomes law. All these things could happen by the time we hit 2026.
Yeah, I think that's really right. Things can change really quickly. It's worth noting that we were talking SBF, less than 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And now we're talking Larry Fink and BlackRock and Ethereum ETPs to go along with the 56 billion in Bitcoin ETPs. It's remarkable how much can change in 2 years. And I think we could see that in this space as well. And I think we will, honestly. That's sort of my base case is we will get there, but we will need some sort of change in order to do that.
But speaking of change, the political winds have changed, and there's been an incredible surge in crypto in DC. Obviously, Donald Trump has put a line in the sand saying he's the pro-crypto candidate. That has forced many Democrats to do a 180 and join with their colleagues across the aisle to get the FIT 21 bill through the House, repeal SOB 121 in the House and Senate. What are your thoughts on this, and do you expect crypto to come up in the debate soon?
It's going to come up in the debate this week. That's my guess. I think this is such a huge deal. I think if the market realized what a big deal this was, it would already be trading at new all-time highs.
Mm.
When we talk to investors, and we have 20,000 meetings with professional investors a year, the number one reason they don't allocate to crypto is a lack of regulatory clarity.
Mm.
And there isn't regulatory clarity because crypto has become this partisan issue. But what you mentioned with 71 Democrats crossing the aisle to support the FIT 21 bill, with the SAB repeal going through both houses of Congress, with crypto now being one of the largest political action committees, with 50 million Americans owning crypto, I think the message is out to politicians that you can be neutral on crypto,
Yeah.
but you can't be reflexively anti. And removing that regulatory cloud from crypto over the next year or two is going to catapult this market in a massive way. So I think it's like the great untold bull story in crypto, and we're going to feel the benefits of it over the next 12 months, maybe as we get closer to the election and beyond. But I think it's a really big deal.
Quick follow-up question on that. So do you feel, to your point, the regulatory clarity is the last hurdle? Because years ago, it used to be taboo. It used to be this is all money laundering. I mean, Larry Fink at one point was saying Bitcoin is a tool for money laundering.
That's right.
Do you feel that stigma and those narratives have all gone? It's just the regulatory hurdle?
I think they're dying. I wouldn't say that they're all gone. You still run into them, but you run into them much less frequently. It's hard to say it's all criminal activity when BlackRock has a $20 billion fund and has tokenized a money market fund on Ethereum. The proof points behind crypto, the things that we were talking about as possible 5 years ago are now true. And
Mm.
so I think those are going away. As we get regulatory and legislative clarity, I think that will remove the last major hurdle. And, then we'll just see the use cases pile up. I think it'll be really exciting.
Hmm. Final question here. So we've got a market pullback right now, which is normal. I've been here since 2016, so I'm used to it. But there's still this fear sentiment that's out there. Obviously, the ETFs adjust, right? There's some outflows. What are your thoughts on this volatility and the impact it may have on future inflows for the ETFs? Is it positive because people buy the dip?
Yeah, I'll say it actually doesn't matter that much. I mean, I know crypto is freaking out and it feels scary when Bitcoin falls, back to 60,000. But a year ago, Bitcoin was trading for 30,000.
Yeah.
And in the TradFi world, in the investors that we talk to, 100% return in a year is pretty remarkable. So from their perspective, when they're looking at crypto, they're looking at 3 and 5 year trends. They're not looking at 3 week trends. I continue to think second half inflows for Bitcoin ETFs that is inflows in the last 6 months of the year, will exceed inflows in the first 6 months of the year. I think we're going to accelerate. And this is just the classic summer pullback. We get this almost every year. We get the same freak out almost every year. And, when I look at all the tailwinds behind crypto, it's hard to be anything but extremely bullish and to see this pullback as anything but a buying opportunity.
Yeah, Matt, on your point of the returns, we're so spoiled in crypto because you can make incredible returns in crypto. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it, and I've invested in stocks and so forth. And I think people, like you said, these small drops, but they don't look at the macro. They're looking at maybe the hourly, weekly, monthly, and it's like zoom out.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Zoom out a little bit. 100% in a year is still pretty good. Which is not to say we couldn't fall further. Of course we could. Summers are funky. There's concerns about Mount Gox. But when you step back, you have ETFs unlocking institutional capital. You have Washington going from being very much against crypto to being neutral to positive. You have new use cases emerging. You have technological improvements. You have it being mentioned at presidential debates. It's just amazing how far we've come. And that's a lot of positive catalysts to look forward to.
Absolutely. Well put. Matt, always great insights. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.